be going live in the next second or two. Here we are. This is a Celtic State of Mind. Welcome to Acsom. I'm Paul John Dykes, and we have Lawrence Conley, Ian Conroy, and Liam Carrigan. Liam diving in from Japan to give us all the big updates on the future of Daisen Maeda, hopefully. Welcome, everybody, to the show. We've had a really busy last few weeks. People are buzzing, obviously, for the start of the season, the Champions League just round the corner, and also the transfer window. And we'll be covering all of that. I'm going to start off, though, with a couple of things. First of all, Lawrence, we spoke yesterday and after the game, actually, about a lot of the decisions that were made or not against Aberdeen at the weekend. I called it a dreadful officiating performance. And a big part of that was, yes, the handball that was right in front of them. Yes, the 10 fouls by Aberdeen players that resulted in one booking. And then Rio and Callum McGregor got a booking apiece in the 73rd minute for the same fouls that had been getting made against us. But also the way that we stood up to that challenge. And we showed a little bit of nastiness, a little bit of aggression. Lawrence, were you impressed with that? Because Aberdeen have become that team. I don't know if they play like that against other sides. I only watch them against Celtic. Every time we play them, they're hammer throwers.
To be honest, I'd need to say the referees performed better than I expected them to perform when I think what his norm is against Celtic. So, yeah, some shocking decisions in there, but it wasn't as bad as he normally was against us. And I don't know if that's Willie and his openness and VAR, who knows. But the performance, mate, after the first 7 or 8 minutes, absolute canter for us. You know, never get out of first gear, really assured, another clean sheet. James Forrest proving he's the best winger at the club. You know, Brendan said it last season, he's 34 and he's the best winger at the club. Hopefully, we'll get some reinforcements later. But yeah, I thought it was a great performance from us. But Beaton, you know, the handball for 5 yards away.
Did you just call him Beaton? That's a blast from the past.
Yeah.
Johnny Beaton. Yeah. Yeah, but on the actual performance of the referee first, before we get to the individual playing performances, Lawrence, I disagree with you. I thought it was a dreadful performance by John Beaton.
No, I didn't think it was good performance. I just thought it was better than his normal performance against us. Normally, he's a lot worse against us. Lets a lot more go. You know, I think he only missed 2 handballs yesterday, which is decent by his standard. You know, it's improvement on what I'd expect from him. There was too many kicks going in Celtic. There's fairly robust challenges, especially in James Forrest first half. You thought would have been yellow cards. You know, James is away. The tackles come in from the side of the back just to take him out. You know, and the cards aren't coming out. So, yeah, what would the ref say? He was letting the game flow.
Well, that's all right if you let it flow for both sides, Lawrence. This is my point. 10 fouls against Celtic players resulting in 1 yellow card. And then, obviously, there was a couple of similar fouls by Rio Atati and Callum McGregor. Both of them get booked in the same movement, incidentally.
Yeah, almost first tackle or first fouls for them. There was one that he could have let advantage go for us, but he didn't let it flow. You know, it looked like Callum and James were going to break. And explicitly brings it back for a foul. You're like, well, we're going to get a goal here.
What it leads me on to is the handballs that you mentioned, Lawrence. The first one right in front of him, obviously, lets it go. Casper saves it, which is great because everybody's telling me it would have been fine if it went in because VAR would have chopped it off. I'm sorry, I'm glad you've got that confidence. I certainly do not. Had Aberdeen scored from the corner, that's a different phase of play. So I was looking at that and thought to myself, you know, he's right there. He's 5 yards from the incident. It's a clear handball and he doesn't penalise. That's just dreadful refereeing. The other one, though, there's been a bit of digging done, Ian. So Paddy Sinnott over on Hail Hail, 67 Hail Hail, he has contacted an ex-referee about the Shinnie incident, which, by the way, there was no replays of that on the live footage by Sky Sports. It was picked up by Jerry McCulloch on Celtic TV. No one else mentioned it on any of the other coverage. So Paddy's done his digging on 67 Hail Hail. He spoke to ex-FIFA referee Mark Clattenburg, who said the following: Celtic should not have been awarded a penalty. It was accidentally, the ball was handball, accidentally in the act of breaking his fall. So the incident itself that Sean Conley spoke about at the weekend was there was a moment where Alistair Johnson was slide tackling and his flailing arm touched the ball on the deck. And Sean said from a referee's perspective, what Shinnie did was the same. So he was breaking his fall. Ian, are you satisfied with that explanation?
I suppose it's a very subjective interpretation and law.
Yeah.
The handball, and you know, it's the old adage about, you know, we've seen them given. The introduction of VAR is supposed to counter that, and I suppose it's a reasonable explanation. Again, you know, my opinion is different to yours, is different to the next man, different to the next man. You know, obviously, as a Celtic fan, I'm going to have biased views on things, but ultimately, you can see the arguments for and you can see the arguments against. And I suppose when an independent voice, an official, you know, from a different country, I'm presuming he hasn't got leanings either way. It's just his professional opinion. Then I tend to accept it.
This is the thing, and I think this is where Paddy has done really, really well here. He's gone to someone.
Yeah, bravo.
Let's say no skin in the game, as it were. Give us your take on this, and he's given us it, and it's maybe not what we want to hear, Ian. But like you say, you kind of accept it. But what I'll throw over to Liam is, what if it's Alistair Johnston doing that in the box at 1-0? I think we just opened the scoring at this point, Liam. If Alistair Johnston does that in our box, is it the same decision?
No.
I think that's my big concern, you know?
No, because it's clearly, we talk about, see, any decision that we say, oh, you've seen it given, right? That's open to the ref's personal interpretation. And this is a referee who we know has a history of giving things against Celtic, and to the point where he's been literally seen in a pub with Rangers supporters celebrating not long after he's refereed a game between Celtic and Rangers. I mean, that someone like that, I don't care how good a referee is. I don't think he's a very good referee anyway, but someone like that should not be refereeing any games that involve Celtic or Rangers, just purely on a conflict of interest level. And to me, that at the weekend just spoke to it. It's like, yeah, he could have given whatever he wanted to give there, and he chose to see it a certain way.
And the big thing is, I'm a wee bit like Ian. I'll just take it. I'll take that one on the chin. We've had it checked out, or Paddy certainly has, with Mark Clattenburg. But the big issue and the big concern for me, Liam, is, like you say, how would he have viewed it on the other side of the park? That would have been very interesting indeed. Lots to talk about. Obviously, recruitment's going to come into it, but we're going to start off with Dyson Maeda.
On that handball, though, I read Paddy's piece, and it's if it accidentally hits his hand, because he's got his hands out to stop him falling. See, when you watch the video back, Shinnie scoops the ball with his hand. There's a movement, a hand to ball to stop the ball going out of play for a corner. Don't think it's accidental when it's hand to ball. You know, it's
subjective. Ian's talking about.
Yeah, it's subjective. It'd be interesting, you know, to get a chat with Paddy and say, look, did you ask Clattenburg's opinion on that? There appears to be a movement of hand to ball that keeps the ball in play. Yeah,
that's a big question, isn't it? Is this accidental? You know, and that's where, going back to what Liam says with regards to bias, if it happens in the Celtic box, it's probably not accidental, Lawrence. And that's where the concern comes in, isn't it? I mean, this is why we're talking about it right here. But again, it was a bit of a shock to me that it wasn't actually picked up at the time. It wasn't replayed. There's no kind of other angles, is there?
You thought, is it Andrew Dallas that was on VAR? You thought he's well known for giving penalties in games. You thought he would definitely have a look at that and call the ref over. Because I watched it back, and I think he's got his hands out, but then there's a moment where he moves his hand towards the ball, scoops it and keeps it in play.
Penalty for you, Lawrence?
It stops being accidental. Yeah, it's not accidental at that point. You know, it's not incidental to him breaking his fall. He's moved his hand to the ball to keep it in play.
I don't know if it will be discussed, actually, in this monthly show that they do online. I'm not sure if it will be discussed because it didn't go to VAR. It didn't seem to be a big talking point at the time. It's the Celtic fans that are talking about it, and mainly online. So, again, big kudos to Paddy. Subjective. We could argue all day. But my big take on it is, if it happens in our box, I think you get a different outcome. John Sweeney, in you come. We're going to be talking about Dyson Maeda in a moment. John Sweeney says, if Maeda and Forrest get injured before the qualifier, then we are in serious trouble. And at this present moment, the recruitment is not fit for purpose with Kuhn. Still hasn't been replaced. Right. We're going to be talking about the dysfunctional nature of all this, because obviously there's a massive thing to unwrap here when it comes to the fact that, Kuhn hasn't been replaced. Some might argue that Kyogo hasn't been replaced. We have brought in a couple of strikers, but has Kyogo been replaced? Has the striker that Brendan Rodgers wanted been spoken to? Has a bid been made for that particular player? Because we know that all the comments around some of these guys coming in is that they're players for the future. So John makes a good point, and we're going to start off with Dyson Maeda. Dyson Maeda, talking about being refereed to different standards, Liam, there was a couple of occasions, even at the weekend, where you're looking at Maeda, kind of saying to the ref, right, I've just done something that's been getting done to me all day long, and you're penalising me for it. And I think Dyson so far has cut a bit of a frustrated figure out in that left wing. Is it as simple as the fact that he's more or less playing in a position that we all know isn't his best position, Liam? But by the way, that's copyrighted by you. You copyrighted that 3 years ago. We all just jumped on the bandwagon on there. So do you think that's a big issue at the moment with Dyson?
Well, first of all, considering the number of tops I've bought off of DHgate down the years, I'm in no position to lecture anybody on copyright, so I'm going to scrap that one.
Other Jesse manufacturers are available.
No, but I think the thing with Dyson is, he's unhappy being shoved out on the wing because it's a World Cup year, or it's a season leading into a World Cup, rather.
Yeah.
And he wants to impress the manager. And while he's stuck out there, he can't do what he does best, which is stick the ball in the net. Japan have got plenty of good wingers. They could do with a good 30, 35 goal a season striker, which we know Dyson could be if he was playing. And it probably frustrates him all the more when, and I don't mean this as any disrespect to Ida, but when Ida's form is not where it should be, Dyson's probably thinking, how can I not play there? I could do that, and I could do it better than he's doing it. But the fact is, we don't have another left winger, so it's necessity. And Dyson is too big of a he's too much of a team player to publicly talk about that. But I think you can see he's not happy with it.
It does look that way, and obviously there's been a lot of speculation, Liam. I asked people to go and check out your blog yesterday because there's this story that's floating around at the moment. And by the way, listen, see when you see a story and you think, what's my confidence in the board when somebody dangles a carrot? See if there's a financial incentive. See if someone bids 25 million plus. See if somebody bids 10 million plus for one of your players. The board's ears prick up, don't they? Someone goes to get the code for the vault, the Scrooge McDuck vault, and they all start getting excited. So there was a story broke, obviously, Liam, about interest, and we've heard it last season. Interest in Maeda. People put 2 and 2 together with regards to him cutting an isolated figure, bids floating about. What is the take over in Japan when it comes to Maeda's future?
That story yesterday, and I just want to make something clear, right? I've seen a few different reactions this morning. When I wrote that blog, I was not intending to have a go at any Celtic content creators, be they bloggers, YouTubers, whatever. I wasn't intending to personally have a go at anybody who ran that story, because if you don't know how the media works in Japan, you could easily be taken in by that story. And it's not the fault of the people in Scotland who chose to run it, right? So I want to make that clear. But basically what happened was a Twitter account that is a rumours account, purely a rumours account, no position within any actual publication in Japan, tweeted a simple one-line tweet that said, Maeda out, Miyashiro in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not... Now, Celtic are rumoured to be interested in Miyashiro. Rumoured, right? I mean, I did a separate blog about that last week. He's a striker who can play on the right wing, and I think he would be an excellent addition to the squad. They would solve a couple of different issues gaps we've got in the team right now, because he can also play on the left. So that would allow Dyson to move back inside if need be. But the two things are unconnected, right? The future of Dyson Maeda, whether it's at Celtic or elsewhere, and I've still seen nothing of any credible sources in Japan to suggest that Dyson's going anywhere. That's not to say that a crazy offer won't come in the next 3 weeks. It could happen, but there's nothing at the moment. And basically what this rumour monger has done is they've taken the rumour of Dyson going to Brentford, which has been floating around for about 2 months now, and nothing's happened with it, right? He's also taken the fact that there is some credible sources in Japan linking Miyashiro with Celtic, and he's, well, if he was a Scottish journalist, I would say he's put 2 and 2 together and come up with 1690. You know, that's the usual. That's the usual way I would put it. He has basically taken these two completely unconnected rumours and linked them into one story, thinking that's going to give it more credibility because it links back to something else that's been reported. But there's no evidence presented to link any of it. There's no sources. No. There is no quotes. There is no primary evidence. There's nothing. It's just literally a guy in Japan who doesn't even have his real identity. It's he uses the name Mr. Fukumitsu, whatever that means. Had to pronounce that carefully there. You know, it's an anonymous. It's basically one of these in the know accounts, but the Japanese version. Mm-hmm. And you know the amount of utter BS those people tweet every day. So it's there is a certain, and this is maybe my fault as well, because I often say that the Japanese media hold themselves to a higher standard than the Scottish media, which, in the most part, when it comes to covering sports, we have a completely different discussion about how they cover politics, but when it comes to covering sports, that is true for the most part. But you still get, for want of a better phrase, bullshit artists like this guy, who was just peddling nonsense to try and generate hype. And that's why he has 40,000 followers, despite having never actually broken a credible explosive in his life.
Well, Liam, I think that obviously with your journalistic background, a lot of this is down to credible source. And we talk about people on here that we deem to be credible. So when a story breaks from a certain individual, you think, right, there's a bit of legs to this, there's a bit of weight to it. So it's great that you're able to do a bit of digging into that story. And by the way, I think a lot would hinge on, I've said before, we are in the kind of habit of selling 2 prized assets a season. You know, if you look over the last 4 seasons, that's what we do. We sell 2 guys who are in the first team, who we can make a profit on every season. That's generally what we do. And we need to buck that trend eventually if we want to progress. Kuhn, I had absolutely no issues with Kuhn going. I think it was a natural conclusion to where the club was, where the player was, and the bid that we got for him. What I said the other day, though, is that what the board needs to realise is that we would never have got £17 million for Kuhn had it not been for the Champions League. The performances, the stage, what Kuhn did on that platform. And they really are gambling with us being on that platform this season, and this is where the frustration is. I'm going to bring in some of the comments, keep them coming in. And but before we do so, yesterday was a very sad day in the world of Celtic, in that John Fallon was laid to rest. The Lisbon Lion, John. I know that on a personal level, Lawrence, you knew him really quite well. I'd done quite a bit over the years with Big John. And he gave me a scarf on one occasion, which I will treasure for the rest of my days. John Fallon, laid to rest yesterday. And then overnight, we heard that Pat Woods had passed away. Now, Pat is a Celtic author and historian and researcher. And quite frankly, nobody that I've ever met in my life knew as much as Pat Woods did about Celtic. It's as simple as that. The man had an encyclopedic knowledge of the football club. And if he didn't know something, he would find out, because he was a librarian to trade. And he loved going out there and finding out new information about Celtic, so much so that his summer holidays would take place in Paris, because he loved the library and the archive department of the library in Paris. And he would go over there to get more photos that he'd never seen from Lisbon. Lawrence is smiling because he knows how dedicated this man was to finding out more information about Celtic. So I had a great pleasure in meeting Pat on a number of occasions. And I felt that when I was writing my first book, that I didn't really have a right to put pen to paper until I spoke to David Potter, Tom Campbell and Pat Woods. They were the holy trinity of Celtic history and Celtic literature. Spoke to them, and from that day forth, all 3 men were incredibly helpful with everything that I did. I used to get packages through the post unexpectedly from Pat Woods. Just, Xerox printouts, all that kind of stuff. He'd found something about Neely Mockin, and he'd be like, right, maybe Paul John wants that, and he would photocopy it and send it out to you. Unbelievable assistance. There are so many other projects he was involved in that maybe his name's not on, but you will see his credit popping up on a lot of documentaries, DVDs, VHS, the whole thing. He's always been there or thereabouts. Pat Woods, rest in peace. Thoughts and prayers with all your friends and family, of which there are many, I am sure. So it was a sad day, Lawrence, wasn't it, for Celtic and for history, because things are changing so much. I don't think we'll ever see their like again. The Holy Trinity, Campbell, Woods, Potter. It was one of my ambitions to get the three. The three of them had never written a book as a trio, right? They'd all collaborated with each other on different projects. And it was always my ambition to get the three of them working on a book together and have the three names on the front cover of that book. It never happened, unfortunately. You're silent, mate.
Yeah, it's a sad day. He's passed away.
You're back.
I'm not too sure what's happened. Can you hear me now, mate?
Yeah, you're back.
Cool. Sad days passed away. Great Celtic author. First met him in the Mitre Bar, just off the Trongate. He used to go in there after finishing in the library. Cracking guy. Really sad it's passed away. And obviously John's funeral yesterday, and the amount of supporters clubs and time John put into that, going to supporters clubs, turning up, spending time just with fans. I know up until recently, be around the pubs in the Cambuslang Blantyre area, speaking to Celtic fans, having a chat to them about football. Great guy. He was halfway guy originally, halfway in Cambuslang, and then obviously brought his family up in Blantyre and buried out St Joseph's in Blantyre. So yeah, very sad day.
Very sad indeed. I'll never forget that day that we had a small event in the early days of the Celtic State of Mind, where it was more or less a live podcast event. We had 6 different guests. Jim McCalliog was one of them. David Potter was another. John Fallon, Frank McGarvey. And it was hilarious because John and Frank fell out live on air. And it was brilliant. 2 mega Celtic men going at it, Lawrence. I don't know if you actually witnessed that moment, but we captured it. Spoke to both guys. They were quite happy for it to go out live, and it is on the channel back in the day. They completely disagreed about a number of things, but they both loved Celtic, and it was tremendous to have the opportunity to spend a wee bit of time with these people. Now, we are going to be talking about the dysfunction. There's the word that I've used, and Paddy Lavery's picked me up on. Yes, Paddy, thanks very much. AI is a great friend to me, Paddy. So dysfunctional. And there is a dysfunctional nature and air around these transfer windows. Even if you go back to last season, Ian, right? And we're talking about the big spend and all this kind of stuff. And we're already, looking at where we are in the month of August. We're on the 12th. At this stage, last year, we hadn't signed Trusty, Ida or Engels. We hadn't done that business. But last year, we didn't have a qualifier. So you wanted to get the business done a wee bit earlier this time round. But I think what happened there, obviously, is, we left it a bit late. We spent a bit much. What have we learned from that? Well, you can take learning from it, Ian, but just to have absolutely no active, irons in the fire is taking it to another extreme. And I think that's where the concern lies. There's been a few good articles written over the last few days. Stephen McGowan, going back to what Liam said, a very credible source when it comes to Celtic. He reckons Brendan will get 4 players before the window shuts. Do you think 4, if it's Brendan's players, do you think 4 will be enough for us? I tend to think it will be.
It depends on the quality. If it's 4 quality players, then I think, yeah. And I listened to the pod yesterday, and it touched on some things that I was saying recently, and things that I think as well. And it was about the likes of Engels, and obviously the board seems that they've sort of panicked a little bit and think that they've kind of overspent, and these guys aren't really worth the money. But these guys are part of the jigsaw. They're not part of the full picture yet. So I think we need to augment what they have and what they've brought to the team. The team did very well last season with them in it. Let's not forget. So they've contributed a lot, but it needs to be augmented with further players of their class. Then we'll see where we want to be. That evolution that we've talked about the the quality going up. So your kind of your worst player, so your best player at the moment, or maybe 2 years ago, then becomes your weakest, because your evolution has happened and you're increasing your quality. But I was thinking about how Brendan has kind of been sold a bogey so often, and it's like, you know, he's dependent on the club going out and getting these players, identifying, and I like, kind of, if I like liken it to what I do as a job, in a way, I work in sort of projects and things, and you have a program of work, and you'll have a critical path, which is on that, and that is basically activities. So you look at the situation that happened at Ibrox when they were doing the steel coming from China, you know, and that was on the critical path. That was fundamentally the material they needed to complete the task. What's happening with Brendan? If you imagine Brendan Rodgers as the project manager, he needs his materials, he needs the procurement, he needs his players as early as possible in order to do his job and create his function. And so the club are letting him down, and it's either by poor judgment or lack of understanding of what they're doing, or just not simply caring. And if you're not caring about Brendan Rodgers having the best tools to do his job at the right moments, then you don't care about Celtic, because it's the product on the park that we all are looking for. You know, it's the men's first team, let's be honest, that is Glasgow Celtic. You know, apart from obviously the obvious, which is the fans. That is the fabric of Glasgow Celtic. But any first 11 that goes onto that pitch is what we want to watch. You know, and we want to see the best players that we can. We've had some wonderful players over all the different eras that we've all watched collectively, and that's only can continue and evolve, you know, during our lifetimes and long after we're gone. But we're complacent. We're complacent, and it's not Brendan. It's not Brendan that's been complacent, and I think he's been very gracious, and he's been very he's just showing his class, I think, again, as usual, and he's getting a tune out of a team that is flying on one wing. And it was noticeable to me in the game. I mean, the past few games really, but it's some of the pre-season. But the way that we're set up to play, if we're persistent on playing on the 4-3-3, players that are looking to play through lines, we don't have Miss Kyogo, him playing on the shoulder. We're missing. That's not Ida's game. I think I said before, Ida needs a foil. I think we need to change the system to get the best out of Adam. His confidence is really seems like it's quite low at the moment, and but notwithstanding, if we the fact that we got rid of, we allowed Kyogo to go. I know he wanted to go, but not to replace him with someone who played like him on that shoulder. That's when we got so many opportunities. That's when he got a lot of his goals, and that's the space he operated in. So anyway, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent there, but it's I think if we can get 4 quality players in, it's not ideal that the season's already started, but they have to be top quality. And if they're top quality, then I'll be happy, and I'm sure a lot of us will be.
Yeah, quality additions, first team starters, that's what you want. And one of the points you make there in relation to the 3 players that constantly come up when we're talking about quality, because all Brendan talks about is quality, and I think what the club looks for is value. So you've got quality versus value, and this is, for me, part of the dysfunction here. So you've got a guy in Arnie Engels, right? Why is he on the bench? Well, because there's somebody better starting at this moment in time, and that's Benji Negrin. So if Arnie Engels is on the bench, why not look at it positively and say, well, it's because we've actually got somebody better than him on the park, rather than always go for the negative, i.e. Engels is a waste of money. You know, well, we've got this tendency to look at the negative hue there and say, well, Engels is on the bench because he's a waste of money. Well, why not say Negrin's on the park because he's been an incredible find and he's been brilliant since the minute we signed him? So look for the positive where it's there. I'm going to bring this in as well because it's in terms of, right, we look at the situation of dysfunction, and we could explain absolutely how we come to this conclusion with regards to what we've done, what we've failed to do, and then the comments made by the people at the football club. Now, the people at the football club is only Brendan Rodgers. No one else makes any comments. So we need to base it on what Brendan's saying. Because the chief executive doesn't speak, the chairman doesn't speak, and Dermot Desmond, major shareholder, doesn't speak. So the only person, the kind of voice of the club at the moment, and on all points, is Brendan. Paul Tisdale spoke once at a fans forum, but he doesn't speak in terms of engagement or content or press conferences or any of these kind of different avenues that you could use, platforms that you could use to communicate with the fan base. So we need to go by what Brendan's saying. And what Brendan has been saying is that, you know, things like, you know, I can't magic them there. We ran a headline yesterday. He's no magician. I mean, that's worrying when your manager's saying that days before a Champions League qualifier. You know, it's really, really worrying. And then what happens is when you discuss it, when you have the audacity to discuss that as Celtic fans, which we all are, and everybody on this show is, people then say, what are you doing about it? You're just sitting there moaning. And I'm going to bring this up from Square Sausage Mick. So Square Sausage Mick says, demand change at board level. Then the dysfunction might stop. It's that simple. Or stop moaning. Well, I'll take the second point first. This is discussing the situation, Square Sausage Mick. Or can I just call you Mick? This is because people in Greenock call it a slice. This isn't moaning, this is discussing the situation, which we have always done as football fans. We've done it in the pages of fanzines. We've done it on supporters' buses, at work, at school, in the boozer. This is what football fans do, and we're doing it on a different platform. And in terms of demand change at board level, you have mentioned elsewhere about boycotts, Mick. So in relation to that, let me just absolutely tell you exactly what I said about boycotts. Boycotts for me, boycotting a game. The only time we have done that as a fan base was back in the dark old days of the 1990s, where it was strategic. That's the difference, right? What would happen if you boycotted a game and Celtic got less than 10,000 fans back in the day? Well, what would happen is the Bank of Scotland would call in their overdraft. That was strategic. It was planned. What would happen if Celtic fans boycotted a game right now? Nothing. Nothing would happen. Because the board would look at that and say, right, okay, we've got a waiting list. We've got other people who'll fill your seat. That is the attitude. And you know what? We don't have a £5 million overdraft that the bank can call in. They're in a much stronger position, Mick. And that's why the boycott wouldn't work. Also, even with all these platforms and all these modes of communication that we didn't have back in the 90s, it would be harder, bizarrely enough, to stabilise enough people to agree on anything Celtic related. So, again, I'm going to bring this up from Anthony Aiken. We have some really serious platforms on the go at present. We do, Anthony, I agree with you. Acsom is obviously where we are. Tino at the Celtic Exchange. The way we need to start to come together and do something real about the way this is unfolding needs proper organised action. Yes, you're right. Now, what I would say to that is any platform with a following, and obviously Acsom has been running now for 8 years. We have been streaming every single weekday for 5 seasons now, and we cover every single game. There's a lot of dialogue and there's a lot of discussion points that we cover. We cover every nuance of Celtic, from the jersey to what's on the park to the boardroom battles, etc., etc. Is fan media influential? I would say yes, it is. It is. We do have contact with the football club. The club do keep an eye on fan media. Absolutely, that happens because they have contacted a number of different platforms, Acsom included, when they've been unhappy with the content that we put out. So, yeah, there is an influence there. There is an influence. But in terms of change, my take, going back to what Mick said earlier on, my suggestion would be that the change has to come from within. Now, what I mean by that is the board of directors, Dermot Desmond, they're all in a very, very strong position right now because they can look at the balance sheet, they can look at the fact that they've already sold all the season tickets, they can look at all the brand deals that they've got, and they can look at the money in the bank. They are going nowhere. If a fan or a group of fans or a few fan groups come together and boycott the team, it will not make a difference to them. It's completely different to what it was back in the 1990s. The way to get to them is through people who already have shares at the football club coming together. That's the way to get to the football club at this moment in time, because they're in such a position of strength. Liam, you will remember the dark old days yourself. And, you know, back then, I felt that the fan movement was absolutely pivotal in what happened, you know, through the pages of fanzines, through the pages of action groups like Save Our Celts and Celts for Change. These guys wrote their name into the history books when it came to toppling the old board. But the board right now, in the situation we face right now, is completely different, Liam, and it will require a completely different approach to make anything change.
Couple of things, right? First of all, everything that happened back in 1994, and every fan, however big or how small their contribution was, from the individuals who organised right up to, you know, people like Brian Dempsey and Fergus McCann who stepped up with the money. Right, everybody deserves immense credit for bringing all that together. But that's the thing, it wasn't just ordinary fans. It was money men. It was people with the business acumen as well. It was a collective of various different people who all had a common goal, and that was to save Celtic. That's why we survived in '94, and that's why Rangers died in 2012, because they never had that cohesion. They never had that common goal. They just stumbled through one sugar daddy to the next because they were too entitled to accept anything other than dominance, right? But enough about them. The way it is now, and look, I totally get Mick's frustration. I feel it as well. I understand it. I just don't think that what he suggests about what to do about it ultimately is going to work. There's an old saying, which I'm going to try and roughly translate to English. The only thing that powerful men fear is losing their power. That's the only thing they fear. And at the end of the day, Dermot Desmond and the rest of the board have all the power. And fans, for all it is our money that put them in that position, we do not have any immediate power to bring them down. And so, like you say, we have to go through people that do possibly have the power to bring them down. That is smaller shareholders. That is people who are looking at investing in a club like Celtic. That is fans who maybe share our mindset but actually have enough money to match people like Desmond. And they're out there. They are out there. But we need to organise that. That's the thing about 1994 that often gets glossed over. Yes, there was a grassroots fan movement, but it wasn't just a grassroots fan movement. It was backed up by people, business people as well, who had that common goal. And the problem is, these days, we have so many people in football in general who are just so greedy and so mercenary. And I include members of the Celtic board in that. That getting that kind of collective together again is going to be far more difficult now than it was in the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, see, right now, we've got a very healthy fan media community, if you like. But for example, if anyone within that community was to say, right, let's all come together. This is a venue. See you there. We want to talk about change at Celtic. You wouldn't get everybody going. It's not like everybody would turn up, Liam. It's not as cohesive as that. Everybody has their own thoughts on this process. I think the final result of, things need to change in the boardroom, and we need to change the way that we recruit footballers. And we need to make sure that the dysfunction between the footballing department and the non-footballing department completely changes. And I also think that we need to have a situation where one person who does not have a controlling share in Celtic actually controls the club. He's a major shareholder. He doesn't own Celtic. You see this written all the time. Celtic's owner. He's not. Dermot Desmond does not own Celtic. And I think what it takes is some of these people who have got more influence within the club, like you say, Liam, to come together and then challenge it from that perspective. And there are many people like that within the Celtic shareholding base. Right, let's know your thoughts. Here we go. Straight off the bat, we've got Brad Ladd, 88. Where are you? Yeah, let us know where you're watching. All over the world, we have people tuning in to get their Celtic fix. We've got the Urban Culture coming in to say good day, fellow Acsom addicts, from a very warm Roscommon. And I think you've met the Urban Culture. Lawrence Conley, has he ventured?
Yeah, brought over a great auction prize for charity, didn't he? So yes, I met him at a secret location in Glasgow. Just like location. Touching some of the points he's raised there, I think a guy that doesn't get enough credit was John Keane. One of the reasons the main reason we didn't go bust is to put over £1 million into Bank of Scotland with no guarantee of getting anything. Basically, they wouldn't close us for 7 days, and they bought us time bought Ferguson time to get the rest of the pieces in position and do the deal with the old board. But that man stood to lose over £1 million, no guarantee of anything, completely, selfless. I don't think he gets enough recognition. And on the recruitment, you were talking about quality and value. So Ian liked it a wee bit to kind of what he does for a day job. Well, I do recruitment for a day job. So yeah, quality and value is decided up front as part of the spec. This isn't something you decide at the end of the process. You get your parameters in at the beginning. What can we pay? What we can we pay in wages? So that list has been out for a while. The scouts are targeted with getting people that fit those parameters. You know, and they'll be speaking to agents. And what would your player be looking for? There'll be informal discussions with clubs. You know, they'll get a ballpark figure on what people would cost, and then they make the list. So as I understand it, the lists of players went in on cup final week to Brendan, and he approved a number of them on the list. And Brendan's come out and said it's not the scouting department, it's not him, it's down to the guys to get it over the line. And this is the weird thing where it gets stuck. We're now getting to players that have been identified on preset parameters who meet those parameters, and all of a sudden we can't get over the line. You know, it's really utterly bizarre. You know, that they're within the transfer value, they'd be within the wage structure if we've identified them and they're on that list. And it's just utterly bizarre that, you know, we're so bereft of wingers. I mean, we had a disagreement, I think, last week, saying, look, you know, maybe your first choice doesn't come in until we qualify for Champions League. But in both positions, I think we're needing 2 right wingers, 2 left wingers. Bring in the guy who's going to be back up now then, because we are desperate for wingers. It's clear Young's not going to make it Celtic. We could attain 1.6 million in Telio and added that to our ever-growing bank account. I think the Matt Riley money's due in soon as well. You know, but at some point we've got to spend some, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, the manager wants it done. He said the scouts have done their job. So as much as, you know, Tisdale's not spoken much, he's done his job. Brendan would appear to be happy and has agreed to a number of targets. But just not getting delivered.
Yeah, I think my concern with that, Lawrence, going into the transfer window, and like you say, there's an agreement in place between the football and the non-football department. I think you've got a set of parameters that the non-footballing, the money men, which obviously we have many of at the football club, set. And when you're talking about a transfer fee and you're talking about age profile, because they want to think, well, can we sell them on for a profit, which is fine. And you think about a wage, okay, it's all kind of planned out. That's the parameters that I think non-football people look at, because they're looking at value for money and they're looking at making money on the acquisition, right, further down the line. Because that's what we've done, and we've done it really, really well. My issue is when Brendan Rodgers is presented with a player who meets all those parameters, but they don't meet the football data metrics, that then mean that that player does or does not fit into a system, which we all know Brendan is very strict on. There's a system of play, and you're looking at players going, does Adam Ida fit this system? Does this particular player who's not very good at passing the ball, i.e. Mike Nawrocki, does he fit the system? Well, obviously not. So although they might have met the parameters set by the non-football people, the football guys are saying they don't fit. Now and again, I think you can get lucky with that. You can get a player that's presented to you that maybe wasn't your kind of first choice, but he met all those parameters and he does well. And then you've got guys that Brendan Rodgers says, he can fit right into my system. And that type of player, I think Brendan would call his player, whereas the other ones that he's been presented with in the past and more or less felt no obligation to buy have been club players. And I think that's a dysfunction of the system.
Well, no, it's dysfunction, but I don't think that's necessarily dysfunction just now. Brendan's come out and said it's down to the guys who do the deals now. You know, he's more or less said the football department's done their part. You know, he's agreed to whatever players that we're trying to negotiate to bring in. And he said maybe he's not good enough at convincing the people that do the deals that they need.
That was a worry.
But Brendan wants these players in.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, they meet the parameters, and we'd assume if Brendan signed off them, they meet Brendan's parameters. We don't know because they've not arrived yet. But he's putting it squarely on the doorstep of the guys that do the deals and have the final sign-off on it. That's what the hold-up is. Not the scouting department, not the parameters, but the actual spending the money.
Then that leads us on then, Lawrence, right? Let's say, and again, we're piecing parts of this jigsaw together. So you go with the Stephen McGowan story where he's talking 4 guys, he's talking 4 players, right? I agree with Ian in terms of the quality of those 4 players, 4 guys that are going to affect positively the starting 11 or the first 15, 16 players, right? Not somebody who you're going to come in and who will end up on a series of loans to develop them. Somebody who's going to actually play their part. So let's say those 4 guys come in, and I'll come to you first on this one, Ian, talking about projects. So we get what we want, but it was an absolute bollock to get to that point. Where does that leave Brendan, do you think? in terms of his future? Does he think, I'm sick of going through this every single time? Because I look at Brendan Rodgers and I think, right, if you give him the tools, and by the way, that needs to be managed. We all know that Brendan Rodgers has brought in many a dud in his time as a manager, right? Many a dud. You just need to look at even Nat Phillips in terms of, value for money. There was none. There was no value for money in that. I think that cost us about $2.5 million in loan fees and wages, that particular move. The guy was a dud. So I'm not just saying give Brendan what he wants. That wouldn't work either. What if he does get the 4 players in, right? Does it? I mean, it's going to affect obviously our performance this season, our chances of progression, etc., etc. But what does it do to Brendan's state of mind when it comes to the end of the season, when there might be another deal on the table? I'm pretty sure that would affect his decision. Sorry, mate, you're on mute.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, I think it does. I've sort of said this in the group chat, and I think I think we were chapping on an open door with Brendan, in terms of him saying that he wants to stay, and he seems happy, and he's always said he's happy with his life in Glasgow and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it looks like he's edging more and more towards the exit door, and that's just not. It's not his preference, but he's almost been sort of constructively dismissed, if you like. I think he came out and said that he would like to extend his contract, but who can work in an environment like that? He said quite firmly that he's not in the maintenance land. He's in the progression and building land. So that's kind of not the way that the two marriages don't seem like they're sort of made in heaven. Dermot Desmond was bold in going out and getting them, and that's the great thing about Dermot Desmond. He's gone out and got some of these big hitting managers, and brought them to Celtic, and they've been a raging success. Sort of the lesser, bigger names like the Ronnie Dylas and things that they've not so. Dermot's, you've gone out and got the guy. Why? It's like if you buy like a really expensive piece of kit and you blend it with inferior. Say you've got a big, lovely, smashing, shiny TV and you get rubbish speakers. It's why do that? If you're going to spend the money, you might as well enhance it as best you can and get them maximize what you get out of it. And that's the same for any player on the pitch. If you've got better players around you, it makes all players look good. All boats rise in a tide. And I know it's a cliche, but it's true. So, in answer to the question, I think that Brendan is going to be off.
No, but that point's brilliant, Ian, right? So you invest to that level, and then what you then have is you have this process of other players playing on that platform that we spoke about earlier that enhance the value of Kuhn, but it also enhances the value of the other players within the team. If you're all playing at that level, and I think that you invest to get there, but what you're investing in, you get back in droves. Because, like you say, everybody rises to that particular. There's a guy there, let's say, who's played last season 10 Champions League games. How does that affect somebody's value? Well, positively, obviously. Now, Jungle Lion comes in to say 4 starters. Imagine, well, you know what? I would hope that it happens. But then the dysfunction, I think probably Ian's battery has ran out. It happened last week as well. The dysfunction is still there. And that's where there would be an issue when it comes round, I think, to Brendan Rodgers talking about his future. Ray,
there should always be some friction between Brendan and
I agree.
He needs to push the envelope every time. Brendan will know that, or Brendan would feel.
Until it becomes unworkable, Lawrence.
Yeah. He'd walk away from a deal thinking, I could have got better play. I could have more money. Problem is, we're crying out for wingers. Jota's injured. It was a bold move bringing him back. Came back as if he'd never been away. Was it 4 goals, 6 games? Unfortunately, he's injured. You've sold Kuhn. We've not replaced Kyogo. And you've got Champions League qualifiers.
Look at the knock-on. Look at the knock-on effect, Launch. You've got Maeda, who's not happy playing out there or would rather play centre forward because he wants to be in a Japan squad. You've got Yang and Telio's moves getting blocked because we don't have. So there's lots of knock-on effects, isn't there? You're playing Jamesy Forrest probably for more minutes than we would like. So it's affecting a lot of different players.
100%. It was interesting. Tony Docherty, after observing Celtic trains, came out and said Jamesy Forrest looked like the fittest player, the youngest player there. Tribute to Jamesy, how he's kept himself conditioned. Can you imagine if he get injured? And I know. Listen, it's likely if tackles keep getting on him like they did at the weekend. They've been down a couple of times. You're like, Maybe we're going to need 2 Champions League qualifiers.
I know.
So, look, listen, end of the window, we could have another 4 first-team starters, and who knows, we might have, I don't know, was it Chiesa, Grealish, Andy Robertson, and the boys Strela up front. And we might be
Stop
going,
it.
what a transfer window that was. You know,
would we be getting called negative? Would we be getting called negative that day?
Yeah, but that would be hindsight, mate. Where we are just now, I think everybody could say, and the managers more or less alluded to it, the transfer window could be going better in terms of getting players in.
Yep.
You know, and that's all I said. So we're not denying that the club's well run, and you know, Dermot's put his money in when the second share issue happened, you know, after Martin, and the club was a bit out of kilter financially. Desmond stepped up, put his money in. No denying it. But we seem to be miserly when it comes to spending money, to the point that, you know, I think they must have more than 100 million in the bank now.
All these things can coexist. They can all be true. And you know, we can be dissatisfied with a recruitment window that's not been good enough, and the club could be well run in other places. You know, it's not like we're saying everything's a shambles. When it comes to recruitment, the big issues for me, recruitment, we need to do it better. Yeah, we can look into the nuances of why it's not working. I think the youth academy needs to be done better, the stadium, the fan engagement. These are things that, although we've got all the success and the club's run well and there's a massive balance sheet, Lawrence, you can still improve, you can still be even better.
The most worrying aspect of it, though, is that the manager feels the need to speak out publicly on it.
I know.
And he's cleared the football department, he's cleared the scouts, he's cleared Paul Tisdale, he's cleared Tim, saying, we've all done our job. So over to the guys that do the deals to get the players in now. You know, and he's having to say that publicly. Well, because he must have said that behind closed doors a number of times. He's not just went out and went, I think I'll announce this to the press today, without having a chat with the non-football department.
Well, the thing is, as well, Brendan Rodgers, in terms of the amount of commitments he's got in terms of media, Lawrence, on a week-to-week basis, he's working closely with the head of the PR department on a daily basis, with the media department on a daily basis. These things aren't getting thrown out just for effect. They're getting thrown out because he wants them to land. He wants there to be, you know, a positive outcome to this. And we look back with hindsight. We look back to the Shved comments. We've got a million wingers, and we've got the Terminado comments. And now we're looking at I can't magic them up, and you know, I don't maintain. So let's hope it doesn't end the same way. Liam, before I bring in some more comments, because there are some brilliant comments, I'm trying to get as many up as possible. Yamada made his debut on the weekend. What was your thoughts about Yamada's debut?
He looked, you know, he looked lively. Wasn't much that came off for him, but he looked lively. He looked involved. Again, it's not to have a go at Adam Ida, but on current form, I think Yamada starts ahead of him.
Friday night,
Yamada needs a full 90 minutes to see what he can do, and the cup game on Friday is probably the perfect platform to do it.
It'd be good to see. It would be good to see Yamada starting the game. And again, how does Adam Ida react to that? You know, sometimes players like that need to be rattled a wee bit to come back stronger. Tony Ratton, you're on the YouTube. Dr. Football could be hatching deals as we speak. Yes, he could be. On a Permo, Scales is lucky to pull off a 15-yard pass on the ground. Inamura can do 30-yarders in the air. Yeah, it's interesting that Inamura's not been.
Inamura hasn't played a league game yet, so just look. I rate the guy, but I would just say to the commenter, just be careful, because we don't know until we see him in a competitive game.
And what have we got on Scales? We've got 3 seasons worth of data on Scales. And when we talk to Alan Morrison, Liam, Alan tells us the reason Scales gets games over Trusty is because he's better at that side of the game. He's better. Listen, Aberdeen at the weekend wasn't his best performance when it comes to distribution. I get it. And there were some howlers, right? But that, particularly when you look at the data that Alan's been gathering over 3 seasons, that's not the norm for Scalesy, and that's why he's getting games ahead of Austin Trusty at the moment, Liam.
Look, we talked about it towards the end of last season. See, when it was getting close to us winning the league and we were kind of staggering over the finishing line, Trusty gets dropped and Scales came in. I think we all agreed, you know, is Trusty a better player overall? Probably. Was Scales a better player at the time to get the job done? Absolutely. And maybe that is still the case.
There's a lot of rumours, actually. around the future of Trusty as well. So that'll be interesting to see what happens with him in terms of the fact that we do have JSP, albeit on a loan. David Boyle, you're on the YouTube as well. The lack of transfer noise is deafening. We are walking into the qualifiers unprepared with millions in the bank. It's a disgrace. David, I get the impression that the board are saying, what are you worried about? We should get through this. And that is a worry. That is a worry because, we've been shown up in the past. Square Sausage, Mick, I don't know if Lawrence was clearly embarrassed at how I spoke to you, but I didn't speak to you with anything other than absolute respect. And I would love to share a Square Sausage breakfast with you, Mick. There's no euphemism in that. So, yeah, at any point you can come and join us in person. And in fact, wouldn't it be good on a This Is Acsom? Wouldn't it be brilliant to get 3 people from the comment section in for a This Is Acsom? That would be tremendous, wouldn't it?
They taught me.
That would be brilliant. I would love to see that. Get 3 guys from the comments on the Friday night show. We do film in Glasgow. Listen, if you're interested in it, I'm up for it, right? So let us know. Get in touch on all the usual platforms, and my email's out there as well, pauljohndykes@gmail.com. If you fancy coming on just for a bit of a powwow in person, it'll be good fun. It'll be good-natured, but you will have to obviously show your face. Mo Sislak, far too much entitlement these days. As Irvin Welsh said yesterday, smartphones have ruined culture. I seen that wee clip, actually. Just finished his latest book last night. Men in Love. It's part of the train spotting world, part of the canon of literature that is started with train spotting, but obviously the chronology is quite different in terms of how it's been released. Go and check it out. Absolutely brilliant. If there's a character from all of Irvin Welsh's books that I want a book dedicated to, it would be Renton's big brother, Billy. Intriguing character. I want to know if a book will be released about him. Are you a fan, Lawrence? Yeah, an Irvin Welsh fan?
Do you know there's a place in Moncur Street that sells Grant and Star T-shirts run by Simon Weir? So I think Irvin Welsh was pictured in one of them. So, yeah.
At the Oasis gig?
Yeah, it was, in fact. Yes, it was. One of Simon's T-shirts made it there. In fact, if anyone's got a spare ticket for Oasis tonight, Simon Weir is on the lookout for a ticket. If not, Simon, I'm going to drop you a message. I might have something else in Edinburgh for you tonight. Someone else is playing in Edinburgh, mate. Someone else is playing in Edinburgh.
Oh,
Big Celtic fan playing in Edinburgh.
Yeah.
New
PD.
album.
Another PD.
Another PD indeed, yep.
Absolutely. JJ Celtic, I don't think we will get better when BR goes. Listen, it's one of the things I don't even want to think about it at this moment in time. You would hope that the boards don't allow that to happen, is basically my view on that. And I think Brendan Rodgers would be prepared to stay if the dysfunction is removed. There was a tongue-in-cheek element to my thumbnail today. It's a big picture of Brendan Rodgers and Peter Lowell cuddling each other. All we're saying, give peace a chance, guys. Give peace a chance. Lawrence.
Listen, I know we're being harsh on the transfer window. You can only really judge at the end of it. And perhaps at the end of it, they'll surpass Brendan Rodgers' expectations and quality and standard again. We wait to be amazed by them.
Yeah, I agree with that. But at the same time, I also think that the club needs to be better at this. We need to do things earlier.
100%. The manager's not speaking out in the press because then we're talking about there should be challenge. That challenge normally shouldn't be come out in the press, though, should it? Should be behind closed doors. And it must be a certain level of frustration.
Oh, yeah.
On Brendan's part. But we can only judge it at the end. The 2 first teamers they've got in, Katie and Negrin, absolutely top quality players. So looks like the recruitment team have done their job there. However, they were identified whether it was Brendan, because obviously his man is Kieran before saying, go and get him. Whether it's one of the scouts has identified him, whether it's the Wise Scout database that's thrown up a player for us to look at. Whatever way we've identified the 2. They look absolute class. They can combine for the goal. Another comfortable win at the weekend. One of only 2 teams with maximum points 2 weeks in. Across the city, we're back to penalty to Rangers. I mean, did you see that? Jeez, if that's a penalty. The boy kicks the ground and throws himself down. Where was VAR on reviewing that? It was bizarre.
There were 3 tugs at his shots to pull him into the body to obviously, make that contact. But anyway, talking about developing players or identifying players, a big shout out, actually. I've mentioned this kid before, Justin Devaney. You might have seen. I've not actually been watching English football for a long time. I said the other day there that I might watch a few games this season. I might actually see if I'm interested, and I'll let you know on this channel if it lives up to the expectations. I used to watch a lot of English football, and I've not been doing it. But I did see online that Justin Devaney scored that winning penalty in the Community Shield for Crystal Palace against Liverpool.
Unlucky not to win it as well. Clipped to post. I think it was his first touch when he came on as well. So you know, positive contribution off the bench, and obviously scores the penalty.
Yeah, he becomes the hero of the game. We mentioned him last season, Lawrence. This is a player whose career was going nowhere. Basically, he was at Kilmarnock. He'd had a spell out at Broomhill, and then Jackie McNamara comes into his life, and Jackie takes him to Airdrie. And Jackie gets him a move to Crystal Palace, and look what he's done now. He's a full international. He's making a name for himself. He was part of the Crystal Palace squad that won the FA Cup. And the point is, Liam, in terms of talent spotters, Jackie McNamara is incredible at it. He's absolutely brilliant. He's got a track record, not only with the guys that he's taken into Airdrie over the last couple of the seasons. You look at the boys that he took into Partick Thistle, Dundee United. Yes, York was a bad move for all concerned, but you look at his track records, spotting talent, getting them moves, developing them. The guy should be working for Celtic's academy. In fact, I would go as far to say I would have him running the academy, Liam. He's got an incredible track record. It's nothing to do with the fact that he's an ex-Celt, by the way. He's just got an incredible track record, and surely you employ people on that basis, Liam.
And problem is, though, he's not a guy who's just going to sit and tell the board what they want to hear.
True.
And that is the problem. You know, I'm going to say something here that I didn't think I'd say often, but Monty in the comments made a good point earlier on. It says, no,
Monty, you've got a right to reply.
I'm only joking, mate. It's all good, right?
I'm going to wait for his reply, Liam. I'll bring it up.
He said a while ago that, you know, the job of a chief executive is to kind of oversee and question the rest of the board, right? That is, you know, that should be the function. Celtic don't have that. We do not have any kind of debate or questioning from any side of the board at all. It's just all this unified sort of a, you know, just this kind of everyone speaks in the same with the same exact stance, and nothing is ever going to change if people don't discuss or call out what they think is going wrong, and they don't, because they're all just yes men.
Right? Can I throw something in there, Liam? Right?
Sure.
Let's just, and this is based on what we know, things that are out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, if you've read Jackie Mack's book, you'll know that there was an issue, obviously, as to why he left the football club. He speaks about Gordon Strachan. He speaks about Peter Lowell. So it's all out there in the public domain. Jackie McNamara was the captain of Celtic. And he was a captain of Celtic in Martin O'Neill's final game, which was against Dundee United in the Scottish Cup final. Alan Thompson scores the winner. Lawrence and Chris Sutton missed the penalty. You'll remember the game. Craig Bellamy, final appearance in the hoops. Jackie McNamara captained us to the Scottish Cup final. Martin O'Neill left. It was a new era. Gordon Strachan comes in. Jackie Mack had a deal on the table for 1 year. He wanted 3. Now, he's explained to us on a number of occasions on the live stage when we do live events that there was 3 different parameters, if you like, in terms of the wages at Celtic. You had the kind of lower earners, guys that may be coming in from elsewhere on really poor wages elsewhere, and we improve them, but they're still in the bottom bracket, or maybe guys coming through from the academy. You had the middle bracket, and then you had the top earners, people like Chris Sutton coming in to the football club on Premiership wages, etc. Jackie, albeit he was testimonial material and he was a captain of the football club, was in the middle bracket, not in the top bracket. And he was asking for money that wouldn't have taken him into the top bracket, incidentally. There you go. All good.
Cheers, Marty.
So he wasn't looking to become one of the top earners, but what he wanted the security of a 3-year deal rather than a 1-year deal. Now, it all broke down. Everybody knows the story, and if you haven't, go and read his book. It's a very good book. He's on his way down to Wolverhampton. He'd given Glenn Hoddle his word, and he gets a phone call in the back of the motor from Peter Lowell. Anyway, Jackie McNamara's relationship with one individual at a football club right? Let's say that's the reason why he's not at the club right now, Liam. Let's just say that we're running the academy with people who haven't really got much of a track record in the last 10 years of producing footballers for Celtic and for Celtic's first team. If the reason is because of a disharmony between two individuals, somebody's not doing their job there, Liam.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's where I think there is a dysfunction at Celtic where, you know what, it's not about you as an individual or your relationship with another individual. It's about the end result for the football club. So you've got to see beyond that, Liam, your relationship, let's say with Brendan Rodgers, or your relationship with Jackie Mack, and give the best people the job and give them the tools to do the job.
You know, I had a similar experience years and years ago, when I was working in Hong Kong, and I was working for this education publishing company. I'm bit of a tangent here, but bear with me. The point is relevant. And I'm not going to name any names, but there was a guy I was working with, and I thought, this guy's a tit. I don't like him. He's arrogant. He's no half as smart as he thinks he is. But then I read his work and I thought, this guy's actually a really good writer. And, you know, I didn't like him. He didn't like me. We went for a pint one day and I said, you know what? I think you're a whatever. And he's like, well, I think you're a whatever. I says, but you know what? I'm an editor and I think you're a really good writer. Why don't we collaborate? And after that, it was fine. Because we realised that the company was better if the two of its, you know, I don't blow one trouble here, but two of the most talented people in our respective positions within the company who didn't like each other, the company was suffering because we couldn't get on, so we sorted it.
Absolutely.
And that is exactly what's happened with Jackie and Celtic. Celtic's youth development is suffering now, and a guy who should be front and centre of it is frozen out, all because two people don't get on with each other.
It's a personal issue.
That's pathetic. That is absolutely pathetic.
It's really, really poor. There's two things I want to finish with. I know Lawrence is on a tight deadline. This jersey behind me is going to be the prize in a competition that we're running all week. We're going to draw the prize winner at the end of the Falkirk game. All I want you to do is like this video, subscribe to Acsom if you haven't done so, and tell us why you haven't done so. And also tell us this jersey, which this one is modelled on, what player does this jersey remind you of? It might even be wee Jackie, now that we've just planted that in your mind. Which player does this original jersey remind you of? It's a classic. It has improved with age. And finally, the final comment today, I'm going to bring it up, and it's your man, because I've saved it. It's Mick. I'm going to give you your last word, Square Sausage Mick. Your last word is time for change. Acsom out of touch. Me, Frank and Pete, the new panel. Well, Mick, if you want to be on This Is Acsom, I am opening the doors for people to come to me on here, on the DM, on email, whatever it is, in the comments, and tell us if you want to come on the show. We'll have every so often, we'll have 3 people from the comments on the show on a Friday night. How about that? I think that's fair enough. You can tell us we're talking rubbish. You can agree. You can get involved, and it'll be a laugh. So why not do that? Use guys and girls on the comments are very, very loyal to Acsom. So giving a wee bit back. You can see behind the curtain and get involved. We film in Glasgow though, so you would need to be able to make your way to Glasgow. If you want to get involved, let us know. In the meantime, 2000 live on a Tuesday afternoon. I've got to thank everybody for getting involved. And once again, thank you to Lawrence and Liam and also Ian for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.